Hello and welcome to our fireside chat Ecclesiastes Pastor's Bible Study tonight. I'm in a different location because I am closer to the fire. It's cold right now. I know a lot of you have experienced some disruption in your power or your water because of the winter storm that we've been having. And so we thought, since both of us have been without power at various points this week, we would go ahead and record the meeting before the meeting, where the two teachers get together and just talk through all of the things we found with the text. One of the
And
things.
you might,
Mhm.
well, and I was going to say, you might lose one or both of us in the middle of this. So we're going to get through as much as we possibly can here.
Yes, fingers crossed we still have power. And then we'll post it for y'all. So one of the things that we'll be talking about is contentment with simple things in life. And I know, speaking for myself, I have a lot more appreciation for the simple things in life, like heat, running water that you don't have to boil, and just having shelter, even if there's no power and no water, having a place to go. And so we want to remain in prayer for those who are still struggling in this winter storm, and all the people that are out trying to get everything up and running again. But we'll talk a little bit more about enjoyment in life as part of this study. But before we get started, a few housekeeping announcements. Normally we would say put your comments in the comment section and send us your questions. But since this is pre-recorded, if you have questions or comments that you'd like Pastor Paul and I to hear, feel free to email us and we can maybe address them on air next week, or just respond to your email. So let's open with a word of prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for all of the blessings that we have today. Just being able to sign in and watch this program shows that we are doing all right. God, we ask your blessing on all of those who are struggling in this cold and nasty weather. And we thank you for all of the people who are working hard through this to keep our community running. Would you speak through the words of Scripture tonight, and would you allow us to learn more from your word, from these commentators, and from your Spirit as we discuss. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Right. Paul, I think you had said that there are a couple of sections as we're going to break down. Can you talk about where we are in the text?
Yeah. So this first beginning of chapter 5 makes a significant turn in tone, where there's some, you might call it more traditionalist wisdom theology that Kohelet is giving to us. And so we're going to talk through my commentator, Elsa Thomas, breaks it down into chapter 5, 1 through 7, 5, 8 through 20, and then takes chapter 6 as its own. So that's kind of a little bit of the framing. This first section is really about trusting God in the middle of our human limitations. If you get in a frustrating situation where maybe you can't do anything about it, the wise thing to do is not to be upset for something that you can't change, but trust God. Is kind of, it is frustrating, it is annoying that you can't do anything, but you've got to trust God at the end of the day, and that's really the best you can do. And so partly that requires being patient with God's timing of things. Maybe Centerpoint Energy's timing of things. Not saying that those are equivalent, but both those timings require patience, I'll just say. Well, I'll just keep going, Kate.
Yeah,
That
go for
there,
it.
that my commentator notes four admonitions from this section. So the first admonition is to be careful when you come to God. Um,
My
Partly that means
words
like,
are guard your steps when you come into the house of the Lord. That's
yes, be careful and be receptive. So I think from a Wesleyan theology standpoint, I think we sometimes can be anti, maybe not St. Paul's. I think St. Paul's is maybe the grand exception to this. Methodists can sometimes be anti-ritual because they see it as formulaic and therefore not spiritual.
mm-hmm.
But I think St. Paul's and John Wesley would agree that uh, rituals can be good. Of course, you should approach them in the right way. But the good thing about rituals is they force you to keep coming back to God. But it's about how you come to God every time that matters, not just that you're doing some sort of ritual. So it's about doing it in the right way, with intentionality, with care. Don't just come to God willy nilly.
Mm-hmm. Don't
The
be
second,
foolish. This talks a lot about fools, how not to be one.
God does not suffer a fool. Yeah,
Great.
exactly right. That's a different reference. But the lectionary had don't suffer a fool. Or was that early in Ecclesiastes?
It's in there
I
somewhere.
don't remember. Anyway, yeah. The second admonition would be let your words be brief and well chosen
Mm-hmm.
for God. And this is, I don't know if I've said this in Ecclesiastes yet to this group, but at least I've thought it in the silence of my own heart. This is just another in the Jesus really enjoyed reading Ecclesiastes series that I've been taking note of as we've been going through this, because this is a lot like Matthew 6:7. So Jesus is talking about not being so like somebody who prays in public long rambling prayers, right? So there's like a certain way in which Jesus embodies a similar kind of care with words. And I have gotten notes on my prayers because they are often brief and very specific. And I have to say that is 100% because of Ecclesiastes.
Huh.
And so I try not to babble on as the heathens do, as Jesus says. But I try to let my words be short and to the point.
Mm-hmm.
The third admonition is to keep your vows. And this is almost word for word a quote from Deuteronomy 23, verses 22 through 23, that quote, how it has. The fourth admonition is don't sin with your mouth. So I think, so here, flesh, as it's written in the NRC in English, it refers to the whole person. I don't know about you, Kate, but growing up, whenever I saw flesh in the Bible, I had one very specific thought in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of euphemistic use of that, I think, in certain interpretations of, your flesh and what it wants and all of that.
Right, like the passions. I mean, this is when you're, and growing up, when you're an impressionable teenager, adults are very concerned about your sexual well-being, and so everything seems to be about that when you're of a certain age. So when you grow up reading the Bible, you think that that's all the Bible has to say to you. So I always think it's important to point out that here flesh refers to the whole person. Um, and my commentator really pushes home that the mouth sinning could be false testimony or blasphemy, or it could be feigning ignorance as a way of lying.
Mm. Okay.
So these are kind of the learnings from this first section. So what did I miss, Kate?
Well, really, what stuck out to me was how all of these really seem to be about how your words matter and acting with intention, speaking with intention, and not letting just a fleeting thing you might say, go out, oh, if the power comes on tonight, God, I promise I will go to church every single week. Well, it says when you make a vow to God, do not delay fulfilling it. It's like, when you're speaking with the Lord, tell the truth and mean what you say. Follow up on a vow. If you don't know that you can follow through, don't make the vow, because your words matter. They mean something.
Now, Kate, would you say that it's not what goes in that defiles someone, but what comes out of the
What?
mouth? That's number
I
two
feel
in the
like that
series.
was in the Bible.
Jesus really liked Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
That's that's a great point, Kate. You made me think of a discussion in seminary. I am sure some of you all are familiar with. I think it's attributed to Saint Francis. Um, Preach the gospel at all times, but when necessary, use words. And I think if you kind of see yourself in the progressive Christian world, that's like a common thing. Like, hey, we don't need to proselytize. Let's use our actions to speak for who we are. I completely understand where that's coming from, but I think that might be a helpful, maybe not counterpoint, but at least addition or a kind of giving a little nuance to that, maybe perhaps oversimplification. So anyway, this discussion in seminary, someone throws up their hand and says something about preach the gospel at all times, but when necessary, use words when they're talking about how to act in an interreligious situation.
Mm-hmm.
An interfaith situation rather. And one snide philosophy background student raises his hand and said, clearly St. Francis never read Wittgenstein. Of course, Wittgenstein was the philosopher who wrote a lot about words and the power of words. And that really gets the heart of it. Words have power. God spoke the world into being through words. So what we say matters. Yeah.
So, all right, ready for section 2?
Anything else from this section before?
Yep. There's a lot we have on the next section. I'm going to go ahead and read verse 8. So we're in chapter 5, verse 8. And so, first we've talked about your words and using them wisely. Now we're shifting gears here, and we're going to talk a lot about the pursuit of wealth and who you might step on in the process of pursuit of wealth compared to contentment with less. And so it starts out, verse 8 says, if you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and right, do not be amazed at the matter, for the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. And so it's already setting up here the systems that create inequality. And my commentator pointed out that you can't take this verse and the one after it and separate it away from the verses that are going to follow that talk about the lover of money will not be satisfied with money, nor the lover of wealth with gain. This is all vanity, talking about goods increasing and all of this. That pursuit of wealth, or as my commentator puts it, the insatiable disposition to acquire wealth, is directly responsible for the lack of justice and basic goods that the poor are experiencing.
Yeah, there's, at a certain point of luxury, there's no thing that you could not get. So that we see these billionaires who, what else do they have to spend it on except yachts? It's like they all want super yachts. And now you have like $10 billion yachts. Like you don't have houses. There are houses, there are yachts that are more expensive than I think almost any house that there is. I mean, even their mansions are worth less than their yachts. And it's like, what? And they don't even use them. That's the wild things. But yes, it's like at a certain point, there's a diminishing return on wealth.
This
There's
is
only so much.
all vanity.
It is Havel, absolutely.
Yeah. It moves on. And remember, this person who is writing identifies himself as a king. We don't think necessarily the author was a king, but might be a person that has experienced a good amount of privilege in their life. Um, in verse 12, it says, "Sweet is the sleep of laborers, whether they eat little or much, but the surfeit of the rich will not let them sleep." So the rich have a lot on their mind or their conscience, and they're not sleeping well, compared to these good, honest, working people who, even if they go to bed hungry, at least they can sleep at night. And that did not sit well with me. I don't know about you, Paul, but reading that, I just went, is it though? Even in just the past couple days, where a lot of people I know who are accustomed to relative luxury are going without things, suddenly being unable to cook dinner, all of this sorts of things you get with a winter storm. um, there are things that come along with maybe not wealth, but enough money, that make it easier to sleep. We'll put it that way. If you have heat, if you have a home, if you have had dinner, it does make it easier to sleep. And so I think there's a little bit of romanticizing of the poor here, that they're just simple folk and they don't have a lot of problems. Um, and I think that may not get to the heart of the issue yet, although it does, deal later with, comparing that with the problems, that the rich are getting into.
And that's it's helpful to think about, Kate. I think obviously I'm no public health expert, but I have read that um, that some of the challenges of poverty are like heart issues are increased. They think partially because your stress hormones are always higher because when you're worried about where your money's going to come from. And we were talking about this earlier, Kate and I, that it's very possible that I'm being a little generous to Kohelet here. That I know, at least in the Middle Ages in Europe, uh, a serf might have 150 days off per year. Their rhythms of life allowed them in a agricultural society to have significant amount of celebration time, and oftentimes there'd be an expectation that the lord of the area or whatever would throw a party, have some sort of celebration that would provide for the serfs. And so they would have some time off where they weren't working as hard, where they might be able to enjoy themselves. But as soon as the industrialized world came about, machines don't stop working. Maybe the field needs to lie fallow, but machines don't stop working. And all of a sudden, you could work all the time. And so people suddenly were working 80 hours a week or something like that in hard labor. And they were, I mean, and I think that was a time when the life expectancy just ends up plummeting because we think of the Middle Ages as being a time when people did not live long, but also the challenges of the industrializing world also really made it hard to live, especially before we had things like vaccines and good healthcare for for children that really helped the life expectancy. I'm sorry, I'm getting off a little bit. Kate, can I go back for a
Yeah.
second back to what you first quoted about the this passage 5:8, because my commentator has an interesting commentary about
Yeah.
how the Greeks, back when the Greeks were in charge, about the time of Kohelet, they really instituted this time of bureaucratization. So what ends up happening in a bureaucracy is, if you're a mid-level or low-level bureaucrat, you're just trying to make your boss happy enough, right? You can get lost in the weeds of the system so that you're not really thinking about how you can make things better for everyone around you, because ultimately you only get benefited if your boss is okay with what you do. And so it creates a system where everyone's just trying to please their boss going all the way up. And the reason it really matters here is because the bureaucracy was pretty small. And if you're in the bureaucracy, you were pretty well taken care of. So you wanted to keep and maintain your place in power in this Greek system that was instituted in Palestine in this time when Kohelet would have been writing. And so it's a cause of great injustice. And then we get this verse 9 is like, I love pointing out the parts of the Bible that don't make many sense to me. Verse 9 is one of those. But all things considered, this is an advantage for a land, a king for a plowed field. Did you have anything to say about that, Kate? Because that one is just odd to me.
Yeah.
And my commentator has a thought, but she even was like, yeah, no one really knows what this means.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of sound like even if the system's broken, it's better than not. Like that this is an advantage to have this system, which they had just said, you know, each layer of the system robs from beneath it. So I don't know. Whose advantage are we talking about?
This is an advantage for a land, a king for a plowed field. My commentator thinks it's possible this is some sort of parable or saying that people had that made sense to them that we can't really understand because we don't know the saying. And but also she considers that it's possible this is having something to do with officials, including the king, taking land that ultimately belongs to the peasants. I didn't really know what she was getting at there, and I don't know how she got it from this passage. Anyway, weird things about the Bible. Love pointing them out. Love to ponder them. I think it's a holy endeavor.
Yeah.
So I think I need to keep us going. We talked about being a lover of money and goods increasing, and sweet is a sleep of laborers. What's next that we need to talk about, Kate?
So I had a couple things that I pulled out. One of them is unless there is wealth in the soul, men go down to their graves with empty hands. And I thought that was a good summary of some of this. And I guess where they're trying to go with the sweet sleep of the laborers is the inner peace that comes from righteous gain as opposed to greed. And so this is kind of one of those, who wants to gain the whole world and lose their soul sort of things. If you're not putting your heart into the right places, you can be wealthy and end up with nothing. That's the you can't take it with you idea. But that was something that the commentator pulled out of this section. Going into, well, we have a lot here in 13 through 20. And where we get into verse 18, it says, "This is what I have seen to be good. It is fitting to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun the few days of the life God gives us, for this is our lot." And then, well, there's something I have to say about 19, but I wondered if you had any thoughts on that, Paul. We've covered a lot of that leading up to this.
Well, yeah. I was looking for, there's this passage that talks about it's kind of Hebel that that you make a bunch of money, but then you don't enjoy it, but like somebody else is there, a stranger is there to enjoy your wealth. And so this made me think of, this is something we didn't talk about. This makes me, and this, I'm sorry, I'm talking about chapter 6. I'm getting on to chapter 6.
We'll get there.
I'm looking at the wrong thing.
Yeah. We've got a few things before we get there.
Okay. Yeah,
Verse,
jump in because clearly I'm looking
all
at
right.
my wrong.
So verse 19 says, likewise, all to whom God gives wealth and possessions, and whom he enables to enjoy them and to accept their lot and find enjoyment in their toil, this is the gift of God. And I thought that was interesting, the line there about God giving you the gift of being able to enjoy what you have. Um, is this one of those confusing times like God hardening the Pharaoh's heart, where you're really not sure what the motivation is here in describing this? Uh, are some people not given that gift and that's why they're greedy? Um, what does it mean to be given the gift of being able to enjoy your things? Um, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting to me. This section is talking all about wealth. It seems, Ecclesiastes, Kohelet um, is a little lighter on the wealthy than maybe other parts of the Bible. Whether you're looking at James or even some things that Jesus says that are very negative on wealthy people.
Mhm.
But Kohelet has a very different goal, and I think we've already talked about it many times. He comes from a more aristocratic background, so he's not gonna be so hard on wealth as wealth, but more about how one lives your life. Into a little bit, it's again, once again, once again for the people in the back, life is about enjoying it.
Mhm.
You know, you've got to figure out, part of wisdom is figuring out how you thread that needle, that fine line between enjoying what you've had and becoming like an accumulator, or becoming like overly lavish or spending. Uh, you know, I know people, I have family members who are um, spend their money and enjoy what they have, and maybe their savings isn't what other relatives want to have, and other relatives talk bad about them because they think of them as kind of unwise, lavish spenders. But I don't know if they're particularly more happy or not, but they seem to have accepted that what good is money if you can't spend it on things that you really enjoy?
Mm.
And, you know,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah, yeah. So I think he's trying to nuance wealth and not be so hard on it on its own, but accept it, accept what you have from God. And
Mhm.
I will say also, Kate, I partly here he has this deterministic thing. Wealth is not something that you earned.
Mm.
Wealth is something that you've been given, and we have this American idea that every millionaire worked harder than anybody else to get there, or was just smarter than everybody else to get there. And we don't accept that probably most wealthy people got there by luck, whether it was the luck of the genetic lottery or whether it was the luck of they were at the right place at the right time. There's a lot of very poor, brilliant people. There are a lot of savvy business people that don't have a dime.
Mhm.
So much of the world is about being in the right place at the right time in terms of like winning capitalism. Uh,
Yeah.
and maybe Kohelet here is being willing to admit, uh, maybe you weren't just the most hardworking person or the most brilliant person. Maybe it was just a whole lot of luck.
Mhm. Um, and I also think that this author differentiates between a kind of, I don't know, I guess we picture the Romans this way, but the hedonistic sort of lifestyle of overindulgence in the food and drink and the partying and the enjoying life too much. And I don't think that's what this author's talking about. When one of the commentators says that it's just that he appreciates the zest for life with which a man's work yields. That, you work hard, you play hard, you live in the now. And that's something. There was another a professor coming out of a religion and culture center in Indonesia who said that you can't buy your future. So if you're powerless to change the course of events, you need to embrace, or Kohelet thinks you should embrace, kind of a realism. And if life is Havel, we should not become obsessed with dreams or goods or causes. And I think the key word there is not become obsessed. Not that there's anything wrong with having dreams or causes, or you need some material goods, but we can't become completely driven that I won't enjoy my life until I get here, until I've ticked off all the markers of adulthood, or whatever your obsession is, that you should enjoy the journey. He says life is a gift of God. It's for living, and not just for I'll enjoy in the future when I get enough.
This plays perfectly, Kate, into Elsa Thomas. One quote of hers is, "What is the point of doing so much for this demanding idol, money, when the idol turns out to be so fragile and treacherous?"
Ooh.
So, yeah, it's money asks a lot of you if you're going to make it your object of desire. And why do that to yourself when it's not? It is fleeting. It is going to betray you. It falls out of your fingers very quickly. Yeah.
Are you ready for chapter 6?
Let's keep the good times rolling, even though we're in Lent now.
Yeah, that's right. So this thought continues again with the gift of, or gift from God. And we've noticed the past couple chapters talk a lot more about God than maybe we have earlier on. But it's still not a very personal God. It's definitely kind of just the creator God, giver of things, but not that relationship sort of way. But here it, or at least that's my interpretation here. It begins with 6 verse 1. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy upon humankind. Those to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that they lack nothing of all that they desire, yet God does not enable them to enjoy these things, but a stranger enjoys them. So that's the opposite of having things and God gives you the gift of enjoyment.
This is the passage, and this was the passage that I was trying to talk about earlier,
okay,
that I got ahead of.
Oh.
So, yeah, there is an evil. I think it's interesting that it literally is. There is a severe illness. I think that's a fun little nuance. There is a severe illness that I have seen under the sun in the world of living. So this stranger that enjoys them, I think from Kohelet's standpoint, this could be this could be pointing to the exploitation at the hands of the Greeks, of the empires that ruled over you. You produce all this wealth, and then the empire just takes it away from you. But I also saw in this like a little bit of if you become famously wealthy, you amass all of this money, but you make so much money you'll never be able to do anything with it. I mean, there's so much you can never give it all away. I mean, it's difficult to give away a lot of money. I mean, there's some people who figured out how to do it, but it's difficult to give away a lot of money. And it made me think, Kate, have you ever been to the Biltmore estate in Asheville, North Carolina?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I've seen it from the curb. I haven't gone in.
Oh, okay. So,
pretty fancy.
So Ken and I took vacation in 2019, pre-COVID,
Mm.
to Asheville, North Carolina. Beautiful country. Went there in the fall, saw the leaves. We loved it. Uh, there's it's a great place to see the leaves change, something you don't get here. So we saw the Biltmore. It's one of the highlight things that you go and see in Asheville, and this kind of reminded me of this. So Cornelius Vanderbilt, the patriarch of the Vanderbilt family, he has railroads and shipping and all sorts of different industries, and he's worth like $200 billion in today's money, something like that. I mean, he's like famously wealthy, right? He's Cornelius Vanderbilt. And yeah, you know who this guy is. He has 13 kids. Hey, doing pretty well. I mean, that's from Kohelet's standpoint, that's what everybody wants, right? You want lots of kids. So he has 13 kids. They get all of his money, right? At a certain point, he gives away some of it. He gives it to Methodists to make Vanderbilt University. But eventually his kids take his money. So he dies. His firstborn son, William Henry Vanderbilt, he has 9 kids. The youngest of William Henry Vanderbilt's kids is George Washington Vanderbilt II. So GWV2 is one of the many grandchildren of Cornelius Vanderbilt. And what does he do with his life? He's the youngest of the firstborn son's many kids. He has no responsibility to take over the family business in any way, but he has tons of money that he's inherited. So he builds the largest private house in the United States, the Biltmore Estate, and he has a dairy that he founds. He founds a forestry school. But really what he does here, and this is what I got away from the tour, is he throws lavish parties all the time. And all the rich and famous people come and stay at the Biltmore, and they have lavish parties, and they go hunting, and they hang out, and they probably drink and eat and enjoy themselves all the time. And I can imagine at a certain point, you just get sick and tired of just partying. And maybe, he took trips and he bought art and he did the things that someone who has no need to work, because they have gobs of money to do. And he has an appendicitis, gets an appendectomy, but he dies on the surgical table in his 50s. So from Cornelius Vanderbilt's standpoint, golly, what's the point of all that money? He works for all of this. I mean, whether he deserved to make all of that money, you can debate, of course. But he gets all of this money, and then his stupid grandson, who just parties his whole life and then builds a lavish house, invites all the famous friends to. I think from Kohelet's standpoint, there's just kind of an absurdity in that whole situation, that this massive house. And then this family is still wealthy. Why? I mean, some of the money, but like the guy's family who owns the Biltmore estate, he gets money because suckers like me want to go see this massive estate in North Carolina.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absurdity. It's like $60 or $70 for one ticket. It's really expensive.
That's why I've only seen it from the curb.
Yeah. That's why we budgeted our trip around going to the Biltmore, because going to the forest was the cheap parts, and then we go to the Biltmore.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there is a certain absurdity in that, in the way wealth works, the way inheritance works, the fact that they get passed down like that.
Yeah, and when you get into the relationships and the family dynamics there, I don't know how close these family members who inherited the money were, or they were just interested in the money. They could have been very close. I don't know. But verse 3 here talks about a person that has 100 children, but no burial. And, to have 100 children, you've made it in this world. That is leaving quite a legacy. But to have no burial would be a deep disgrace. That not one of the 100 children of this person was willing or able or nearby somehow they weren't able to do the rites that would be required for a proper Jewish burial. And so, again, it talks about having all of this money, and legacy, but what's the point without that connection in life?
This is all to say Cornelius Vanderbilt does have a big old mausoleum, and he had, fancy people there to preside at his
Right.
funeral.
So he had but yeah.
But still, there's some sort of absurdities in the whole thing, nevertheless. Yeah. My commentator says about this that life is about quality,
Mm-hmm.
not about quantity.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
thought, oh, hmm. Um,
Yeah.
well, rounding out the end of chapter 6, do you have any last statements, Kate, about wisdom here?
Well, there are a few things that stuck out at me. Verse 7, all human toil is for the mouth, yet the appetite is not satisfied. Um, and I guess that goes into the daily maintenance. I mean, you have to keep eating. So if you're just working to eat to survive another day, and then you eat so you can work again the next day, and then you only work so that you can eat, and that's ultimately an unfulfilling cycle. Um, and it says, for what advantage have the wise over fools? That's what's the point if you're just trying to perpetuate this cycle?
Can I jump in
Yeah.
on? But you made me think, Kate, about one social theory is that if you are of a certain social class, you conceptualize your life using the metaphor of a struggle. So you think about everything in terms of a struggle, and every part of life is a hurdle to get over. But once you reach a certain wealth, you conceptualize life as a journey. And
Huh.
I've always thought of life as a journey, right? I've always thought it about a pathway that unfolds, that you take different roads, and it leads you a different place, and you think about it as an adventure, maybe even, and it's all about that journey of life. But if you're struggling, to your point, if you're struggling every day to get food on the table,
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard to think of it in terms of decisions and journeys and paths and all that. It's a struggle. It's a battle every day just to get food on the table, to care for your kids or whatever it is. And yeah, there's some absurdity that you can't enjoy your life in the same way because of this. We already talked about it in this session. The stress of what it means to be living in poverty. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that is us reading, from our position of privilege, same as the author here. Yes, life is a journey. Enjoy as you go, and not thinking about when literally all your toil is for the mouth. Like that is, getting food is the extent of what you can do with your work. That's a much different journey to be on. So, yeah. Another thought here in verse 9, better is the sight of the eyes than the wondering of desire. This is also vanity and chasing after the wind. It's kind of the better is a bird in hand than two in the bush. Having something that you can see and being content with it is better than what else could be out there. And so I thought that was important to remember.
And yet this also is vanity and chasing after the wind. It's like I take it to be like, be satisfied with what you have.
Mm-hmm.
But also that can still be absurd, and also life can be painful regardless. I mean, there's something like,
Yes.
it's like he always seems to be hedging his bets, this Kohelet,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's like, it's better to do this, but also in the end, it might be terrible. So don't take my word for it,
Yeah, I see a lot of that here.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he's a wily character, this
Mm,
Kohelet. I and kind of there seems to be this idea in the end here that um, the best part of wisdom is kind of acknowledging what you don't know.
mhm,
These verse 12, this last verse of chapter 6, um, for who knows what is good for mortals while they live the few days of their vain life, which they pass like a shadow, and for who can tell them what will be after them under the sun. My commentator says these are two questions that uh, are just kind of unknowable. And you kind of have to admit that you don't know. These were questions that a sage maybe was supposed to give an answer to this um, uh, in this time, but um, Kohelet is kind of admitting that these are unanswerable questions.
mhm,
Uh, what are you supposed to do with your life? I don't know. That could mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, and maybe you'll never really know the answer to that.
mhm.
Is kind of what Kohelet is saying. Uh, what happens to us after we die? I mean, yeah, sure, I can tell you what I think, but like I don't actually know. I mean, that's a little bit about what Kohelet is saying. There's so much about how you live your life in this book. There's so much about how you die well in this book. But also he's saying here, I mean, but also I have no idea. Again, this guy's really hedging his bets a little bit.
Yeah,
Like Kate, I have some takeaways from this whole
yeah,
thing.
go
But
for it.
do you have any last comments on chapter 6 that we've missed?
Um, Not specifically 6, but just kind of my last thought is just a reminder, to take pleasure in the journey, the struggle, wherever you can, and take time to acknowledge the blessings you have, the gifts from God. Be one of those people who is able to enjoy what they have. Um, and if those are the very simple things in life, all the better.
And Kate, you made me think again about we talked about how hard it is to be poor in this section. But also we forget there's great joy that everybody feels. And partly it's about kind of getting to where you're at is people can find joy, even though life is absolutely harder when you have very limited resources, everybody can still find joy in things. And I think I, some of y'all in St. Paul's, we talk about racial justice. In this past year, we've talked a lot about racial justice, and people get tired because there's a lot of sad things. Because unfortunately, the racialized caste system of the United States is not a fun or happy thing. But as some people have reminded me here recently, there really is a need to acknowledge Black joy, the joy that comes in being Black, and I think that can be said about um, well, not in the same way that it's joyful to be poor. That's a different thing. But I think that it is kind of acknowledging that, like, I mean, yes, it's absolutely harder, but also everybody can find joy in this life, even if it can be harder. Um,
So I guess acknowledge where it's harder and where your part in the system is. Are you making it harder for someone else? Going back to chapter 5.
great point. Here's my takeaways for our whole lesson for today. First is be intentional about your worship.
Mhm.
St. Paul's, we love to worship. I think that's wonderful. But don't forget to be very intentional about it. Be fervent about how you worship. Um, my second takeaway here is God didn't ordain the injustice in our world. Uh, like none of this is preordained. This is like systems and decisions that are made. Sometimes by all of us, sometimes by a few people who are corrupt or something like that. As Kohelet sees it. Um, Number three is learn what it means to have enough money, have enough possessions, have enough, whatever it is. Figure out what enough means. My fourth takeaway is life is about quality, not about quantity. And don't give yourself to the idol of money.
Mm.
My fifth takeaway is the best part of wisdom is being able to acknowledge that which you can't know and learning to be okay with that, such as what life after death looks like and what the best way to live your life is. Those are my wrap ups.
All right. Well, we're so glad y'all were able to tune in at whatever time or place you are able to view this. We hope you are warm and safe, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
And I will add, if you are watching this either just after it's gone out or recently in the last few days or week after it's gone out, be on the lookout for ways in which you can help your fellow Houstonians with this freeze. If you go to crowdsourcerescue.com/freeze, or if you just email me, there's lots of ways that you can be of need, but we're also going to be putting together work teams that can respond to the people who are dealing with house issues. You can imagine a lot of this is going to look like hurricane recovery because of flooding, right? Because of these burst pipes. So we are already skilled. We already have the tools and the skills to be able to do some of this work. And so I'll be sending out that information as we get it. That said, if you have friends, if you have folks you know around you, check in on them. I know you already have been. And I'm probably the one after a long line of people to say check in on your neighbors. But go knock on everybody's door if you need to. With that, I will close with a word of prayer. Most merciful God, your son Jesus met us in the middle of a storm on the sea. And even before he calmed the storm, his presence was a sign of hope. Lord, remind us of your presence through your Holy Spirit that you have given to us to be our protector. But also, Lord, we want the storm to be quieted. Quiet the storm for us so that we can once again jump up and care for our fellow humans, that we can show the love that you've shown us to everyone around us that we know. And Lord, finally, quiet the storms that are in our hearts in this time. Lord, we know that you, best of all, are always with us. And after this storm passes, and we go back to living our lives, remind us of the lessons that Kohelet is teaching us today. We pray all this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Go in peace.